There's another man I want to mention as I close. It's a man who was born in 1927 here in the United States. So he graduated high school right about the end of World War II. He was a brilliant young man and very technically oriented, and he went away to college. At the end of college, he decided he wanted to become a missionary. So he became a missionary, didn't know any other languages but English, so he went to Central America and learned Spanish. While he was there, he met his wife, whose name is the same name as my wife, Elizabeth. They got married, or at least they got engaged. I think they got married a little later. And then he joined up with 4 other people. And in the 1950s, they went to the jungles of South America, in the Andean jungles. And because he and his buddy were so smart, they figured out a way to fly a plane around so that they could have a rope on it with a bucket on it with a loudspeaker in it so they could talk to people without landing. Can you imagine? They figured out the trajectory of the plane so that the bucket stood still. That's good science. I have no idea how they did that. So they could drop a bucket in the middle of a clearing, and they learned a couple words from these Indians that were called savages by the Quichuas, and they put it there, and the people would respond. They would record the responses, translate them, learn what they were saying, and talk back and forth to these. They did it for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and then they would put bananas in there, and then they would put gifts in there, clothing in there, scarves and blankets in there as gifts for them. And finally, one day, they decided to land the plane. 5 of them land the plane on a river. I've been right at that river, on a sandy beach on the river. It was January, I think, 4th, maybe 5th, 1955. These 5 guys landed. The river bank was called Palm Beach. They had called it Palm Beach, and it's interesting, we live in Palm Beach. They called it Palm Beach. They landed the plane, and all 5 of them were killed. Jim Elliot, Nate Saint, Yodarian, Fleming, and Macaulay. Can't think of their first names. But Jim Elliot, after they all died, his wife's name was Elizabeth Elliot, after they all died, they found his journals. And he said these words in his journal when he was maybe 21. He said, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Do you hear that? You are no fool if you give up what you can't keep to gain what you can't lose. So that's what this verse is about. The verses that Mike read that we studied last week and the verses here. You're not a fool if you give up what you're already going to lose. And every one of us knows everything we've stored up here we're going to lose, because rust, moth, or thieves, or our own death is going to cause us to lose it all. But because of the transformation from physical to spiritual, you can send it ahead. It can last forever. Senior citizens, it can last forever. Young people, it can last forever. And my encouragement to you is to consider what you're doing. If God leads you not to do anything here, don't do it. But pray and ask the Lord, what would you have me to do? And consider what Jim Elliot said before he died. He was actually quoting Matthew, I think, chapter 19, when he said that. And let's see if I can find it. Chapter 16, when he says, "What profits a person to gain the whole world and lose his own soul?"